Hi, Gerald Kein again, and you're talking about hysterical cases and people that could be classified as hysterical, and your instructor is doing a great job. But you know, I just have to leap in here and tell you a story of what happened to me when we're dealing with a hysterical person. I think you'll find it interesting. I was just a young man. I was probably about 16 years old, maybe a little less, maybe in the 15 area. I can't quite remember anymore. But I had about, with an early instructor by the name of Carnella, when I was very young, he was starting to teach me hypnosis, that old-fashioned kind of stuff where you were doing progressive relaxation work. So he said, one of the great ways that you can learn how to do this is by watching me. And I have to give a seminar to a group of people at a stock brokerage firm on stress control. So why don't you come along and watch and see how it's done. Put your suit on. Well, I was growing like a weed, so I went home, put my suit on. Of course, it didn't fit. The sleeves were too short. The legs were too short. My white socks were showing. But I didn't care. I just was so excited about this. So we went over to this stock brokerage firm, which was back in the 50s, not to date myself, but I just did. And it was owned by a woman, and which was unusual because women generally didn't have those type of businesses back then. Actually, she had about 7 stock brokerage offices. And we went into this one, and there was probably about 28, 29 stockbrokers in there that wanted to learn these stress control techniques. Well, my friend Carnella gets up there, and he says, my name is Carnella, and he gives them a short pre-talk about hypnosis, very short. And keep in mind, as I'm telling you this, up to this time I only had very little instruction in hypnosis. And he looks up at the audience and says, you know, he says, you may have noticed that young man I came in here with today. His name is Gerald Kein. And his family are famous hypnotists from many years ago, through many generations in this country. I'm scratching my head going, that's not real. My father is a lawyer and nothing to do with hypnotism. Anyway, he says, and Jerry is probably one of the most experienced hypnotists in the world today. And let me show you what I mean. Why don't we invite him up here to do this seminar and watch how great it works? Well, when he said that, my mouth dropped down. I couldn't believe it. Next thing I remember, he said, let's give him a hand. And everybody's clapping, and he's saying, come on up. And I started walking up there in a daze. I had no clue what I was going to do. The only inductions I really knew is up to that point was working with a progressive relaxation and maybe a pendulum. So I go walking up there, and as I'm walking past him, he says to me, just remember what I told you. Well, I walk up and get behind the podium like this one, and I don't have a clue what he told me. Finally, it hit me, and I remembered. He says, you know, these people don't know how, what you do or how you do it. So anything you do is going to be okay. And if you foul up, just don't say, oops, and you're going to be fine. You can go back and do it the other way. And I said, I can do this. I was brave when I was a young guy. I said, I can do this. So I got up there, and I says, I didn't know what to do. I saw he had a stress control pattern on the podium, but I thought probably the best way to do this would be to get a demonstrator unit up there. So I made a cardinal mistake that you'll never make, and I asked for a volunteer. You see, when you ask for a volunteer, nobody volunteers. Well, nobody volunteered. And I'm standing there up there, this little 15, 16-year-old kid maybe, and finally the woman that owned the firm volunteered. Well, you have to remember, at this part of my life, my voice was starting to change, and I was deathly afraid of only one thing in this world, and that was girls. I couldn't talk to them. If I was going to talk to them, my throat would lock shut. I was doomed. Anyway, up comes this woman, and she happened to be extremely beautiful, a redhead. And as she came up, I set a chair out next to me, and I said, sit down, please. I could barely speak. And I didn't know what to do. And here she is, the first real woman I was ever near, probably, I think, in my life. And I didn't know what to do. So when you don't know what to do, you whip it out. So I whipped out my pendulum. And I held it in front of her eyes like this. And as I did, I started to say something like that, and now as you watch the pendulum, feel your eyes becoming heavy, droopy, drowsy, and sleepy. And I was amazed. That's exactly what happened. And I said, they're closing, 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 and they did. And I'm going, wow, this is so cool. I never did this before, you say. And then, I'll make believe I'm her for this story. As she's sitting there, I start rolling into a progressive relaxation induction because I just didn't know any better back then. Anyway, as I'm starting to generate relaxation, the most unusual thing began to happen. The first thing that happened was her legs were starting to move rhythmically back and in and out like this. I thought that was interesting. And then her head started to rotate, something like this, along with the legs moving in and out. And then her respiration started to increase, and it looked and sounded something like this. Well, obviously, something was going to happen, and I wasn't really interested in seeing what was going to happen, I'll be honest with you, because it looked like a major explosion. Now, what do you do when this happens? That's a classic case or situation of what we call the development of a hysteria within the person or a hysterical person. So what do? Who do you call? Well, I didn't know what to do. I remember Vic told me, based on the old training, that if this ever happened, what you're supposed to do is stand behind them, stop their head from rotating, and then emerge them from hypnosis. Have them open their eyes, stop the trance induction. And then, once they were back to normal, to try it again, and usually it's fine the second time. If they have the same problem the second time, you're supposed to, according to the old ways, send them to a psychologist, you say. Well, that may be true back then. Today, what you would do, but only after the advanced portion of your class, it would be wonderful. Because when you see this happen, first thing you do is you take a position something about on this angle. You raise this hand up like this, followed by this hand up like this. You bring them together like this. You look up and say, "Thank you, Lord," because you have just had all the work taken out of your induction. At that point, all you have to do is let it build up, and then boink them on the head like this and say, now follow that feeling back to the first time you ever felt it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boink. Where are you now? Daytime, nighttime, inside, outside, alone, or somebody with you? Give me a report. And you've regressed them right back to this tremendous negative energy that they're beginning to expose to you. So, but until you have the advanced portion of your class, just stop it in the manner that I told you, and everything's going to be fine. But you need to be aware of this, because this will happen to you. It may not happen to you with your first or second or 20th client, or it may happen with your very first. So I got through it. You're going to do it even better than I did, because now you know what you're doing, and I had no clue what I was doing. So that's my story on that one.